Hi everyone, I'm Tori and my name is short for Observatory, and let me tell you my Observastory. I've been around here for a really long time and I get lonely sometimes, so I really appreciate you guys visiting me. But let's not dilly-dally now. Are you guys ready for a TBT or a turn back time? Welcome to the universe 13.7 billion years ago. As you guys know, everything that I am is a product of something that happened long ago. The universe was a very small place and it could barely fit anyone. I remember it being very hot out there too. I wasn't there yet at the time, but I am able to show you guys what I'm trying to say. I mean, look at where we are now, everyone. I remember there being a grand force governing everything in the beginning. This entity was called supergravity. Over time though, things started getting a bit too heated up for her, So she realized eventually that she just couldn't handle anything. Next thing I know, there were 4 forces. These were strong force, EM force, weak force, and gravity. All of those 4 big guys have really great relationships with everything. In outer space, they get along pretty well. Until now, they maintain great relationships and cooperate with everything and everyone, which makes everything easier. These forces, as I have seen, helped with the development of the entire universe. The first stage of the universe was pretty cool if you ask me. My friends told me before that the universe expanded for a fraction of a second, creating a bigger singularity. Okay, going back to what I said earlier, the universe back then was a super hot and dense place. The energy from this time converted into mass, and this is supported by the mass energy and equivalence principle. And now, let me introduce to you these tiny particles called quarks. Did you guys know that there are even generations when it comes to these quarks and leptons? Yeah guys, these are actually pretty easy to remember. The first generation is the most stable one compared to the others. The second generation is slightly unstable, and the third generation is highly unstable. As the professors and scholars who have visited me said to me before, there's a process called radioactive decay which allows the unstable particles, quarks or leptons, to decay into first generation particles to achieve stability. Think of it this way, the third generation particles are like students who are having difficulty in school. They try to change themselves to have stability in school, just like you guys! After a little bit of time, the universe started growing and wow, its expansion was simply mesmerizing. But since its distance increased by 1 billion kilometers, the temperature dropped. At the same time, the formation of quarks and leptons has stopped, and so has the conversion of these into energy. Why, you ask? Well, this is because the gluons are being controlled by strong force, which brings these quarks and leptons together, and these then form what we call protons and neutrons. You may ask, what is the role of strong force anyways? Let me answer this question with another question. Are you familiar with the law of attraction and repulsion? Well, this law basically states that opposites attract and like things repulse. This is governed not by strong force, but by EM force. The role of strong force is to overpower the former and keep the nucleus together regardless of the repulsions that it's experiencing. This is just like classmates who hate each other but are grouped together for a project. The hate that they feel is caused by the EM force, and the strong force is the instructor that put them together and the threat that they will fail if they do not work together. Pretty cool, huh? Now let's look into the universe's first second ever. You'd think that barely anything could have happened within this time, but you are wrong. On the contrary, this whole place has expanded 100 billion kilometers. The expansion has caused the temperature to drop, allowing the protons and neutrons within to create the first hydrogen atom. And after some time, these elements fused into helium. Whoever said that nothing can change in a second probably didn't know about the Big Bang nucleosynthesis. Yeah, try saying that 3 times. The cause for the first ever nucleosynthesis are 2 forces called EM force and weak force. I heard from a little someone a while back that the weak force is the one responsible for the decay of a proton to a neutron and vice versa. When a neutron decays to a proton, an electron is made as well, making the proton and electron attracted to each other due to the EM force. And yes, these forces are the reasons as to why hydrogen came to be. The fusing of the hydrogen isotopes in order to create helium is actually the first ever nuclear reaction, and not just any nuclear reaction. This is the one we call nuclear fusion. Now going back to the story, I must tell you that the universe is not how it was before. The temperature is now 3000 degrees Kelvin, and it is also decreasing in density. Meanwhile, the first light elements, hydrogen and helium, are capturing electrons, causing their electric charges to become neutralized. But get this, since electrons are now knit to the atom, a separation occurred, a separation between matter and light. Let's look back to the times before the separation or decoupling happened. As you can see, the only kind of light that was present at the time was infrared, and the photons here were also stuck inside plasma. I also mentioned earlier the temperature dropped, and this led to the lessening of kinetic energy around. Simply put, the lower the energy, the slower the velocity of the plasma. And finally, this led to the said particles turning into neutral gas atoms. From what I learned from outside sources, these events actually allowed the electrons to orbit around the nucleus. This is an example of things that are affected by what we call EM force. I can also recall someone telling me that while the velocity of matter decreased, the photons were still traveling at the speed of light. Because of their speed, they were able to escape the nucleus and separate light from matter. And after these photons were released, something called relic radiation was made, and this is also known as CMB, or the cosmic microwave background. This time, the universe seemed at a standstill. Everywhere you look, the only thing you'd notice is the darkness, which simply surrounds, well, the universe. Photons may be present, but there were no stars at this time to give off light. A befitting name was given for this stage, the Dark Ages. Because of the horribly low energy levels and the very large timescales, the activities that used to happen within the universe just diminished. As a mere observatory, I can only come up with a single conclusion. The force that is gravity has not yet collected nor condensed any gas particle. Oh, I do believe I have not explained to you the last force, and it is also the weakest force, might I add. Gravity. It actually intensifies the differences in the density of various things, such as the gases that surround us at this very moment. This force, despite being the weakest one compared to the others, is still very strong, and it can act on objects and heavenly bodies, might I add, from a distance. Gravity can actually trigger nuclear reactions, and it is the reason as to why the stars exist in the first place. Do you guys remember what I said about the Dark Ages? Well, what I am about to say now may make an impact on you, so listen close. There is a type of energy that people call the dark energy. This type makes up 70% of all the energy that is present in the entire universe. And what makes this quite anomalous is that it overpowers the fundamental forces such as gravity, and this can be proven by the accelerated expansion of space. I've come to realize that the universe in a way is like a thin person who slowly gains weight. His organs are not the ones that are growing, yet the space is expanding between his organs because of the increasing number of fats. After a few moments, a process called stellar nucleosynthesis is done. Others told me that this is categorized as a nuclear fusion reaction which occurs in the core of the stars. It's pretty phenomenal, in my opinion, because this is how elements range from helium to iron are made. But this process cannot be done without an extreme amount of heat and pressure because a whole lot of kinetic energy is needed. The tiny nuclei of the elements hit one another so that they could fuse into bigger ones. Now, how does this happen exactly, especially since we just found out how hydrogen and helium are made? It's actually pretty simple. When the two elements that I just mentioned run out, heavier and heavier elements are combined together until iron has been made. Pretty nifty, huh? Aside from stellar nucleosynthesis, there's another process which creates heavy elements. This is called supernovae nucleosynthesis, also known as the supernova. They are very, very violent because the star collapses on itself and the inside of the star's core is pushed out into space. This only happens when the star runs out of fuel or energy. This process really excites me. It's so interesting how the star can reach 100 billion degrees Celsius when it explodes, and how this process involves a large number of neutrons, which fuse into atoms into all other heavier elements of the periodic table. In short, it's very useful and interesting because these supernovae are able to create more and more of the heavier elements. Modern-day stars and galaxies are definitely different compared to those that existed in the past, don't you think? Even I can see all the way from Earth that things have changed. And it's a good thing too, because now there's more variety when it comes to elements since the heavy elements have been created. Yay! Okay, just remember that the very first stars were made only of light elements, while the stars and galaxies today are made of heavy elements. This is just like the cities in the past and the cities now, right? Our cities then were composed only of the basic needs of the people, while the cities today are heavily specialized with the specific needs of its citizens. This TBT just made me remember how amazing these events are. But wait, there's more! If you weren't able to get the difference between nuclear fission and nuclear fusion, let me help you out. Nuclear fission is the one that can generate power with less greenhouse gases. It is also involved in the splitting of a nucleus in order to obtain its smaller parts. And another difference is that it can be triggered by man by shooting the isotope with a neutron. Nuclear fusion, on the other hand, is the reaction which requires a high temperature, and it's a process wherein smaller nuclei combine to create a larger nucleus. Oh wait, whoa, hold up. I will still introduce to you guys the topic that is radioactivity. Can't believe I almost forgot. So, what is radioactivity? I guess you could compare it to the feeling that you get right after you eat when you're bloated. When you get this feeling, you would want to puke out the food in order to feel better. Same goes for radioactivity. When there's an imbalance between the proton and the neutron count, the nucleus spits out an electron to achieve balance. There are 4 types of radioactive decay: alpha, beta minus, beta plus, and gamma. Don't forget that they all start off with an unstable isotope. Once alpha goes through a decay, an alpha particle or helium-4 nucleus plus an isotope with 2 less neutrons and 2 less protons is emitted. Beta minus emits a beta minus particle or an electron plus an isotope with 1 additional proton but 1 less neutron. Beta plus emits a beta plus particle or positron plus an isotope with 1 less proton and 1 added neutron. Gamma emits a gamma photon plus the same yet more stable isotope. I think it's getting pretty late. I mean, it has been 13.7 billion years already. Okay, let's go back to Earth. Okay, so now let's recap everything, shall we?
The singularity of the Big Bang came out of nothing, just like the Pokemon Acreos. Separation. Supergalaxy splits into the 4 forces, namely strong, weak, EM, and gravity. First stage is inflation. It is the expansion of the singularity. Second stage is the quark era. Quarks were created due to energy, following the mass-energy equivalence principle. The forces affecting it is the weak force, because of the decay from a 3rd-gen quark to a 1st-gen quark. Next is the formation of protons and neutrons. Quarks came together to create protons and neutrons. The force affecting it is strong force because it overpowers EM and keeps the nucleus intact despite repulsions. The Big Bang nucleosynthesis is the creation of the first hydrogen and helium atom. The weak force affects this process due to the decay from a neutron to a proton creating an electron, while EM force attracts the proton and the electron creating the first hydrogen atom. Nuclear fusion is involved in this process because it fuses the hydrogen isotope to create helium. Decoupling is a separation of light and matter. The force affecting it is EM because it allows electrons to orbit around the nucleus. Next is the dark ages. No visible light and activity is diminished due to low energies. Gravity has not condensed any gas particles yet. The formation of stars and galaxies is due to gravity, which pushes together gas particles closer and closer, forming a star. The fusion of hydrogen atoms creating the very first star is nuclear fusion. The accelerated expansion of space. Space is expanding at an accelerating speed due to dark energy. Dark energy overpowers gravity, causing the expansion. Stellar nucleosynthesis is the creation of elements from helium to iron. Nuclear fusion is involved because elements are fused in the core of stars with high temperature and pressure, creating elements until iron. Supernovae nucleosynthesis is the creation of all other heavy elements in the periodic table. Nuclear fusion is involved because of the high temperature and abundant number of neutrons, allowing the fusion of elements, creating all the other heavy elements. Next is the galactic and stellar evolution. Modern-day stars are composed of heavier elements compared to first stars, which were only created using hydrogen and helium. A quick analogy is that Big Bang is like building with Lego, while stellar is like building with wooden blocks, and while supernovae nucleosynthesis is like building with actual wood or concrete. The concept of this is like heavier elements need more ways to be able to keep them stable. At the present day, there are two types of nuclear reactions. The first nuclear reaction is nuclear fission, which is the splitting of a large unstable nucleus to two radioactive nuclei. Next is nuclear fusion. There are two smaller nuclei combining to create a large nucleus. There are four types of radioactive decay. First is alpha, releasing a helium-4 particle plus its corresponding isotope. Next is beta minus, releasing an electron plus its corresponding isotope. Next is beta plus, releasing a positron plus its corresponding isotope. Last is gamma, releasing a photon plus the same yet more stable isotope.
Did you get that? Okay, that's all for now, everybody. I'm Tori, and I hope you enjoyed my Observastory.